That was quite the kickoff to our 3-part season finale. And I was very impressed, particularly with the action sequences this episode. Also, some of the directing flourishes were very nice. But you know what surprised me? I was surprised at how little Bastion registered as a villain, especially after he had been built up so much with the reveal last week. And then also for the people behind the show to reveal that he'd been in numerous episodes before that. We just missed him, just like the X-Men had. So considering how much care was put into this villain, I thought he'd be a little bit more front and center this episode. I mean, of course, we got his origin story, and he certainly made some major moves, but he himself as a character, as I said, didn't register quite as much as I expected. I mean, you bring in Theo James to do the voice, you would think you got a little more going on here. But yeah, a lot of drama, a lot of flourish, and that's really helped this show, particularly on social media. We're still waiting for the viewership to come in. So far, a little low, but I mean, it's a new show. It doesn't have the number of episodes to compete with longer running shows that have multiple seasons behind it. But it sure trends like crazy, so that's fantastic for the show. So where do I want to start? I want to start with Magneto was right. Now, this was a slogan that Grant Morrison first used in the comics on a t-shirt worn by the rebellious Quentin Quagmire. It started out just kind of like something in the background, and it grew, even in the comics, to a bigger movement. You know, starting out, I think, with the t-shirt, potentially as a reference to Che Guevara, but also, I would say, you could even say it was a reference to Guy Fawkes, both real-life individuals who have become pop culture symbols of anti-establishment rebellion. And the recent Hawkeye series, by the way, even did a take on Magneto was right, with Thanos was right, as you might recall. You know, I think that there's always been a contingent that has sided with the more violent revolutionaries, but I think today, as things get even more tumultuous and more divided, you know, does that sentiment feel, you know, more widespread than ever? And it's interesting to see a show like this tap into that. At what point is it enough? That's what Magneto so poignantly utters, enough, right before he emits a global EMP, not just taking out all the activated Prime Sentinels, but oopsie, all the Earth's power plants, etc. as well, which, by the way, seems to free the villainous Omega Red. Wolverine says it's a clear act of war, but is it? I mean, is the news so under Bastion's control that humanity can't see that this was an act of self-preservation? Please tell me someone's on X tweeting about it, right? That's so often how the truth gets out these days. It was a nice touch that Bastion released that footage of Xavier with the Shi'ar to put the X-Men in a bad light. I was like, oh, very, very much shades of today. Now, in the 80s and 90s, captured superheroes often got stripped down to their underwear or even less. But here, I think it's, of course, I think to show just how humiliated and like just stripped down Magneto is at this point, so low, but it also allows us to see his serial number from his time in the concentration camps, underscoring just how much Magneto has been through, more so than all the other mutants. So that perhaps is what gives him the insight and the resolve to lead the mutant rebellion. And right after he releases the EMP, very fittingly, that's when Professor Xavier returns to Earth and utters his own famous line, "To me, my X-Men," to balance out Magneto's actions, as has so classically been the case. So that was very nice. That was a great shot. And then also you were like, where the heck has Storm been? Why are you guys not using her? But that was a very nice shot. Now, before we get to some of the other developments this episode, we got to talk about the two incredible action sequences. Also, the fantastic shot of the X-Mansion burning and the photo of the original X-Men with all the flames around it. Oh, the feels! Oh, as I said, a very nice flourish. But as for those two action sequences, first up, Wolverine and Nightcrawler versus Prime Sentinels. This was incredible. And while Wolverine is in this sequence, it's all Kurt Wagner, baby. From the classical music to the swordsmanship. 3 swords, 1 in the tail. And then what really made the sequence was the incredible moment where we experience Nightcrawler's powers of teleportation from the inside, from Wolverine's perspective as he gets pulled through. Wowie, wow, wow! I mean, what a rush. I had no idea it felt like that for Nightcrawler to teleport. No wonder he does it all the time. I mean, it was so cool. I don't think I mean, it might have been done somewhere, but I've never seen that depicted before, even though it is known that Kurt travels through an alternate dimension, but I don't believe we've ever gotten to see it. And also the black hole effect where Wolverine got stretched a little bit and he kind of almost had to hold on, and then his perspective of Kurt looking where they're going. Oh, I mean, it was just incredible. I just thought it was great, and it gave great insight into Kurt himself to better understand him through his powers. And as I said, what a cool feeling to do that. I mean, it was just really neat. This sequence also reminded me a bit of the incredible opening to X2, where Nightcrawler takes on the White House, also using his teleportation powers to incredible effect. So that was neat. They never really got the prosthetics right on Nightcrawler in live action, but that sequence was still very, very cool. I think they even used classical music there as well. And I wonder if this sequence here in X-Men 97 was meant to be a nod to that. And then, of course, don't mess with the Summers. That whole sequence complete with the perfect landing. I mean, it was a beautiful shot. Talk about a family photo. And I'm glad that Jean Grey is wearing her ponytail again, because it just looks better with this version of her uniform, at least in the animation. Her hair down looked pretty cool in the comics with this uniform, but for some reason I don't think it looks as good in the animation. She looked great here. Some of you pointed out that I forgot to mention last week just how powerful Jean is, catching half a building and then throwing it into the nearby river. Well, this week she's just as powerful, both with her telekinesis, but also her telepathy, as the Summers discover Bastion's origin at his childhood home. And Jean is able to pick up a lot of the childhood memories off of those artifacts. By the way, did you catch the Stark Expo Easter egg? Bastion, a living machine, would of course enjoy a tech expo. I thought that was cute. Now, Bastion's origin was changed slightly from the comics. In the comics, Bastion is Master Mold and Nimrod combined, and their memories wiped to create Bastion. But here, Nimrod somehow travels to the past and infects Bastion's father, whose wife then gives birth to the first human Sentinel hybrid, Bastion, which in some ways makes his childhood similar to that of mutants. I saw some people referencing online that this sequence was a nod to the Man of Steel, so that's interesting to cross over to a different comic book company, but it did seem very similar, and so clearly the people who make this show are not only X-Men fans, but pop culture fans in general, so that's nice. But so, in many ways, his childhood is similar to that of mutants, but they're on opposite sides of the same coin. Much like Magneto and Xavier, only here, humanity and mutants. Which is really supposed to underscore that we're all actually very similar, but Bastion, I guess, hasn't learned that lesson yet. He's made some very powerful friends, though, even more so than we imagined. We knew he was in bed with the government and the UN, but move over, everybody. Dr. Doom's in there, as well as Baron Zemo. And, you know, it's been pointed out that this is not in the MCU, and you can kind of tell that at least from Baron Zemo's costume. He, of course, does not look like the Baron Zemo that we all know in the MCU. Now, who is Bastion's assistant? At first, I thought maybe Moondragon, and I've seen some people guess Karima, who we discussed last week. But it's actually Daria, right from the original comic, also a Prime Sentinel. And I'll mention her again in a little bit because there's something else about her that I don't want to give too much away, but there's a reason for her to be there. Now, speaking of balance, we get a hero cameo as well. Spider-Man showed up very briefly, as well as the villain Silver Samurai. Now, back to Bastion. What's with his old school Nazi-style car? And we also got a reference to the infamous Nazi Dr. Mengele, which is what Val Cooper calls Mr. Sinister. Ooh, I was waiting for Val to morph into Mystique any minute. I was like, she's going to do it. Oh, she's going to do it now. But she never did. And considering she could have morphed after freeing Magneto to get out of there, she must not be Mystique. What? I mean, good for her and humanity that she still did the right thing. Because like when she freed Magneto, I was like, oh, it's definitely Mystique. But apparently it's not Mystique. And where is Mystique then? I saw a nice little interview, by the way, with X-Men 97, talking about how the team intentionally brought in the original voice of Jean Grey from the animated series to voice Dr. Cooper, because she would then get to deliver the Magneto was right monologue. And again, that was a very nice touch or flourish. I liked that. Maybe she's voicing Mystique? How is that not Mystique? All right. So what sends Val Cooper over the edge? Well, it's that Bastion is weaponizing civilians, and not just any civilians, but the toxic ones on the internet, similar to the Riddler's followers in the Batman. Is that why the X-Men don't feel so bad about slicing and dicing them? I was like, aren't these regular civilians? Can't they maybe be brought back to their original humanity? Wolverine did not seem to care. And whoa, what did Trish have to be so angry about? But that was a great twist that she was a Prime Sentinel. I didn't see that coming, actually. But I did fully expect Bastion's mother to be a Prime Sentinel. I mean, the house was so creepy. She's a hoarder. Woo! But it's still, even though I was expecting it, the sequence was still amazing. From her body twisting and cracking as she transformed, to how good she was with her powers. Like, I particularly like how she deflected Cyclops' blast. I thought that was great. Cable explains that the Prime Sentinel virus has actually evolved from the techno-organic virus that infected him as a baby. I like, very nice to bring that back around. And apparently, by the way, he was separated from Bishop in the time stream and still landed in the future alone, even though Cyclops had specifically sent him with Bishop so he'd have somebody with him. Where the heck is Bishop? And why hasn't he tried to come back? I smell a season 2 storyline. And as I said, when is Storm coming back? Storm better return with a vengeance, because I'm surprised that with just 2 episodes left that she's still sidelined. Anyway, as Bastion sees it, the Prime Sentinels aren't just weapons, but a new type of human, evolved to overtake mutants, which in Cable's future they do, creating a utopia where Prime Sentinels live in harmony while mutants are put to work. Here we see an older Polaris, by the way, Magneto's daughter, who shares his powers, and Rachel Summers, Cable's half-sister, the one I keep bringing up all the time. He's taken so many of her storylines. Well, whatever. But still, that's her. Those tattoos on her face are when she was, I believe, a hound is what it's called. Great story there, too. When Wolverine demands to know why Cable didn't stop the attack on Genosha, hey, buddy, if you're time traveling, Cable says he tried enough times to give up. Oh, that was a great line. Because each time he was pulled back, and Beast theorizes then, based on a Commertage theory, Doctor Strange shout out, that there are absolute points that happen in all timelines, events that must happen, which is why the timeline literally would not allow Cable to intervene. But this leads to another revelation that Jean understands why Madeline Pryor was happy when she died, because she'd gotten to see her son right before he was pulled back for the umpteenth time and the Genosha attack unfolded, killing Madeline Pryor. We also learned that Jean seems to have absorbed Madeline's memories, which, considering that Madeline has been with Scott, you would think that would be super awkward. But I guess he thought it was Jean at the time, but still. Anyway, Jean instead chooses to focus on the pregnancy and birth of Nathan, which makes Cable feel very much like her own son, even if Cable himself doesn't feel that way. I guess that's why I'm always into telekinesis. I think this telepathy might be too much for me. Finally, the Jubilee and Roberto storyline. Jubilee upgrades to her current costume in the comics. I thought that was nice. Although how she could buy that at a regular store, I'm not sure. Right before they're attacked by Prime Sentinels. And I loved Jubilee's no more malls decree, because of course in the original series when we first meet her, she's also attacked at the mall by much bigger Sentinels. And luckily, Roberto finally becomes Sunspot, including flying. That was also great. Jubilee's like, everyone can fly but me. And Sunspot's like, yeah, me too. So that was great. But it was super weird that his mother sided with the Prime Sentinels. They were like, we are here to protect mutants. And she's like, okay. Why didn't Jubilee and Sunspot just blast their way out of there? Maybe they agreed to put on inhibitor collars. Maybe they were worried about hurting his mother and the other humans at the party. I guess they were pro-Genosha after all, right? Because that was a Genosha fundraiser. We'll see where the storyline goes. But another reason that this might have had to happen is that Jubilee was kidnapped by Bastion in the original Operation Zero Tolerance comic. So perhaps that's why she's captured here as a nod to that original story. Daria was a very big part of Jubilee's storyline in the comic, so we'll see if they keep that here as well. I think they must, or they wouldn't have introduced her. I did think it was interesting to talk about evolution and humanity upgrading through technology. Didn't Elon Musk just put a chip in some dude's brain? Would humanity distort themselves to such a degree to not only ensure survival, but perhaps to try and regain supremacy? It's also interesting to me that any one group would consider itself superior, yet history shows that has happened time and time again. I believe in coexistence, just as Xavier does, but to be fair, Magneto has tried to believe in it too. Xavier just hasn't had anywhere near the horrible life experiences that Magneto has. And one has to wonder if the idea of peace is only possible to those who've lived sheltered lives. However, and that hit me hard. But then I remembered that a few real-life people have continued to stand for peace even after going through the most dire of circumstances, which makes their stands all the more meaningful. I wonder if they'll reflect that in this show. I mean, they're walking a very fine line. But it's really fascinating. Very few pieces of entertainment are willing to go the distance and to dive into uncomfortable topics as much as this show is willing to do. And the X-Men are the perfect property to do that with. With all the Prime Sentinels already down, I'm very curious to see what they do with the remaining 2 episodes of the season. So what did you think of part 1 of the 3-part season finale? What were your favorite moments? And who do you hope will get some really standout moments before the season is over? Where's Mystique? Where's Storm? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.